Sixto. There could not be a better name.
I love the names on this team. They have Sixto Sanchez, and they have my favorite name probably in baseball right now, Jazz Chisholm.
To win a championship, not only do you need great players on the court, but you need good chemistry, which takes time to develop.
It's weird how the dynamic works between sports. But
showing emotion in baseball is terrible and should never be in the game.
Blame Luke Walton for that. They have a lot of young players that I believe can really excel in this league.
Corey Perry will give some veteran presence to the Canadians and to just help give some insights on what he did last year.
Justin Fields is a all-time talent, and we definitely need to take into consideration his health.
This was a trade that the Senators really hope would work out, as Matt Murray has won the Cup 2 times.
Even though this is Mr. Irrelevant, he may be Mr. Playing Time after this season's over.
Just amazing, and I don't care what the Red Sox got for trading Mookie Betts and David Price. The Dodgers, in my opinion, win it. I don't have to see what players they gave up.
Charlie McAvoy also is, I think, a Norris contender, a top 5 Norris contender this year.
When Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones make jokes about not valuing the safety position, well, we can make jokes about you not being in Super Bowl for 20-something years, but
I feel like Luka will take that next step, and if he can get a 3 ball consistently around 35%, I feel like they could become a contender.
It just goes to show the offense for the Dallas Stars could not keep up, and when the defense needed to step up, the Lightning's offense just overpowered them.
Yeah, I was impressed by their game. Braden Point, Andre Palat, Nikita Kucherov, that was the best line in the playoffs, no doubt.
What's up, everyone? This is Justin Goldman from the Goalie Guild and Lift the Mask, and you're listening to Outsiders Opinions with Austin and Kevin.
What's up, y'all? Welcome to our 69th episode. Make sure to check out our last episode where we talked about the NBA second round play in the playoffs and reviewed that, and then gave a preview of the conference finals. And today we will be reviewing our NHL predictions, which we made for the regular season. Next episode, we will be doing a Stanley Cup preview, the Stanley Cup final preview. But we'll start with the North Division. Number 1 was the Toronto Maple Leafs in the regular season. What were your thoughts on the Maple Leafs this season?
Yeah, I mean, we predicted them to be first in their division, and I think everybody did, really, except for some avid fans of teams in their division. But yeah, I was impressed by the regular season performance. They did well against the Oilers. They shut them out in back-to-back games, including one game by Michael Clutchinson. He shut them out one game. So, I mean, the Toronto Maple Leafs were really on a tear during the regular season, and it really shows that the regular season really doesn't matter as much. Of the 4 teams that made it to the conference semifinals, or not the conference semifinals, the Stanley Cup semifinals, because there is no conferences. All 4 teams were non-1 seeds. The highest seed was a 2 seed Vegas, and all the rest did not have the luxury of having home ice advantage for the playoffs. And Toronto had that this season, and they floundered it. They lost in 7 to Montreal, who's currently on a good run, you could say.
Yeah, pretty good run. And the specific thing about the Maple Leafs, Austin Matthews was an incredible goal scorer. This year, the offense was just on the tear, especially at the beginning. Their power play was just incredible because they had all their best players on one power play shift. But that did not come up in the playoffs. But now at number 2, we predicted the Calgary Flames, who actually missed it. We'll get to them where they actually ended up. Number 2 in reality was the Oilers, who we just had at number 3. So that's a good job from Edmonton. We were close, but what were your thoughts on Edmonton?
Yeah, a team that was second. They obviously got swept in the playoffs by the Winnipeg Jets, and that's obviously not how they wanted their season to end. They wanted as many playoff games as the Chicago Blackhawks, the Dallas Stars, all these teams that missed the playoffs. So,
wow,
it's not great.
You just had to put Dallas.
I know I had to, yeah. But I mean, it's really shocking that the Oilers, with all their offensive prowess cannot seem to get consistent defensively. They're also playing all their star players way too long. They don't trust their secondary scorers, and they only play Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid extra minutes, and those two lines played, the two different lines that they're on, played for the majority of each of those games. And we're seeing from Montreal, while they do have quote-unquote 4 lines, all 4 lines score, all 4 lines play defense. And while there is a defensive line and a scoring line and all that stuff, you can't really tell by their performance which line is the fourth, which line is the first, which line is the second. But with Toronto and now with Edmonton, you can tell the top 2 lines and you can tell the bottom 2 lines, and they just really can't do anything when the bottom 2 lines are out there. And that's really an issue when you come to playoff time, where people like Montreal are running 4 lines.
Yeah, that's very true. And maybe they make some moves in this offseason to get some older guys. Maybe Corey Perry's back on the market again. He's been good the past 2 years, getting his team to the finals. But number 3, we had predicted Oilers, but it turned out to be the Winnipeg Jets, and we'll get to where we had them predicted. But Winnipeg really stepped up because we didn't have them making the playoffs, but they did make the playoffs, and then they swept Edmonton. And they were also part of the trade that traded away Patrick Laine. Am I correct?
Line, yes.
Line, okay. And they got Dubois, who didn't really play that well in the playoffs, but Patrick Laine isn't really playing well for Columbus. We'll get to that later. But what were your thoughts on Winnipeg?
Yeah, so Winnipeg was a team that I did not anticipate, like you said, making the playoffs. And so when they did, it was certainly surprising. And then you didn't even have them winning a playoff game. So that prediction, it helped you because they swept the Oilers, which I think is kind of suspect to say the least. But I mean, they're a team that probably could have won a game or 2 against Montreal if Mike Scheifele did not make that hit against Jake Evans, but he did, and then they're really exposed for the team they are. They also can't run 4 lines, and while they did have key injuries of guys like Andrew Kopp and Ehlers wasn't fully healthy, you could definitely tell that their defense just wasn't it. They really could not stop teams consistently on the defensive side, and that really was their downfall. And while they did make it out of the first round, unlike the 2 teams at the top, they didn't win their division championship, you could say, as Montreal made it to the Stanley Cup semifinals.
Yes, and that's a good transition because number 4, we have Montreal. We predicted the Vancouver Canucks, and that didn't turn out so well. We'll get to them in a sec. But Montreal, I mentioned Corey Perry, Eric Stahl. They have been great on that quote unquote 4th line, but it's really hard to tell. It probably on the other teams, they'll probably be 3rd. But they're being very productive, and that's another reason why they've made it this far. But they squeaked in the regular season, which is good. But what about their overall performance in the regular season?
Yeah, of the teams that made the playoffs, they had the lowest point percentage. So technically, they were the worst team coming into the playoffs. However, now they're one of the best too. So that just shows you what regular season means and what postseason means. You need a veteran core, guys who've done it before. Eric Stahl won a championship with the 2006 Carolina Hurricanes, and Corey Perry won with the 2007 Anaheim Ducks. So, I mean, you have guys who've done it before. And Tyler Toffoli, he won one on the 2014 Kings. There's a lot of guys on this team that they brought in this season who've won before. And that's really key, especially when you're trying to make a Stanley Cup final run. It also helps to have Carey Price. So,
yeah, that's some excellent points. Carey Price, just a little odd fact, is the person that Landon Bow said he'd modeled his goaling after. Make sure to check out that interview. Just a little side note. So I bet he's really happy right now. Now at number 5 in reality, we have Calgary. We had them at number 2. They just fell. They lost Talbot this offseason, who played really well for Minnesota. And What problems did you see that kept them from making the playoffs this year?
Consistency. They could not beat the good teams. They could beat up on Ottawa somewhat, and they were beating up on Vancouver somewhat, but consistently speaking, they could not beat Toronto. Even though they were having a good record, I think, against Montreal, they really could not beat the guys at the top, and that's really what you need to do for them to have a good run. Jacob Markstrom, I think, played well, but could have played better. Like you said, Cam Talbot probably played better for Minnesota this year than Jacob Markstrom did for Calgary this year. Johnny Gaudreau and that line didn't put enough scoring up, and Matthew Tkachuk and his hitting prowess really couldn't come through. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of parity in the NHL. A lot of teams that made it last year didn't make it this year, and vice versa. But I mean, it's really cool seeing teams like this. It's really surprising because I honestly really thought Calgary was going to make the playoffs. Obviously, as we had them at second. But man, I just thought they had made enough moves in the offseason to secure a playoff spot in a division I deemed as weaker, not only because it had 7 teams, but also because the no Canadian team had made the Cup, besides the Canadians, obviously, this year, since 2011, which was Vancouver. That's a decade ago. And no Canadian team has won the championship since the Canadians in 1993. So it's been a while since the prowess of the Canadian teams has shown, but this year they finally made it, and Calgary couldn't come through to pass Montreal, but that seemed like a much harder task than we gave them credit for.
Yeah, it's very true. And I know you definitely remember 2011 against the Canucks for personal reasons.
I do remember. I remember watching that series, but I actually get to see my team win a championship in my lifetime. So,
wow, more shots. You're kicking me while I'm like in just despair right now. It's kicking me while I'm down.
But a crazy thing about that series, Kevin, is that the home team had won every game in the series until Game 7, where Boston beat Vancouver 4-0 in Vancouver. And I watched that game at Disneyland at a hotel while I was at Disney.
Flexing right now.
No, I just remember it so vividly. I remember watching Game 7
while I was in the Disneyland suite with candy.
I was not in a suite. I was in one of those houses that had like a tiny pool in the back, and it had all the mosquito netting behind it. Because in Florida, mosquitoes are the size of birds, and they'll.
Really?
Yeah,
that's interesting.
I think so. It's different in Florida.
Well, yeah, many things, but Florida's the state of championships right now.
True.
But we're getting a little bit off topic. So now we go to Ottawa, who we had predicting being last, but they actually weren't last because Vancouver, that was not good. But Ottawa, still in rebuilding. But what things did you see this regular season?
Ottawa was so impressive towards the end of the season, and if the season was 82 games long, they really could have made a run to possibly make the playoffs. They were really good, and I am so excited to see how they do next season. They're a team I've always liked because of how bad they've been for the entirety of my life. I know they made the finals back in 2007 against the Ducks. You can fact check me, but I'm 90% sure they played against the Ducks in 2007. But and they also went on that run where they lost in 7 to the Pittsburgh Penguins in 2017, and if they won that game, they would have made the finals again. So they haven't really been good for the majority of my lifetime. However, sometimes they do have sparks, and Carlson will bring them all the way to a game away from the Stanley Cup final. But yeah, I'm really excited to see how they do in the future. Tkachuk and everyone else on that team is really coming through. I would be surprised if they don't draft a goaltender, considering how the performance of their current goaltender went. But yeah, because Matt Murray just wasn't it. But like I said, they really impressed me, and I think they have an exciting future that I bet their fans can't wait.
You said 2007?
Yeah, versus the Ducks.
Yep, you are correct. They lost in Game 5 to the Ducks. And then, recently goalies in the first round have turned out well, so wouldn't be a bad pick for the Senators. Um, one of them most notably being Jake Ottinger, also Vasilevsky. It's pretty good.
Both played in the
And
finals
now-
last year.
Yep, he's incredible. Now we'll get to Vasilevsky later, but now we have the Canucks, and not really much to say here. But what do you think?
Yeah, so they made a move to get the Capitals goaltender, former goaltender. When I thought that they should just start Thatcher Demko, because I think they should try to go younger right now and rebuild that way. Last year they were a game away from making it to the conference finals, but Vegas made it out, and obviously Vegas lost in 5 to the Stars. But I mean, I thought the Canucks were on the rise, but then they continued to get rid of Jacob Markstrom and then get rid of other guys on their roster that just were that I thought were good. Tyler Toffoli, they didn't even make an offer sheet for. Now he is in the Stanley Cup final without them, but yeah. But yeah, the Canucks just didn't make any right moves, it seemed like. And that really costed them when it comes to playoff time or close to playoff time because they have no continuity within their roster. Their roster was volatility different. And when you have a different goaltender, someone who's trying to keep everybody together, and you have the same coach as last year, Travis Green, who I really thought they should make a move move off of after this past season, the 2020-2021 season, and then they didn't, and they're bringing him back. It's just confusing. They're kind of running in circles. I expect more out of them. They're a team that I definitely don't hate, even though we did face them in the finals, like you said. Because they're just not. They never won a championship, and while they've been there 3 times, 1982, 1994, 2011, they never won. They've been to Game 7 twice. 1994, they lost to the Rangers in 7. 2011, they lost in 7 to the Boston Bruins. I'm not saying I have any qualms with them losing in 2011, but they never won one, so I can't really hate them. They're a team that I know you probably know these teams, but they're teams that never won before. So you're like, if they win, you're not mad. Even if they beat your best team or your favorite team, it's like they never won before. So you got to be like, okay, well, I'm not going to be too hateful on them. But I mean, Braden Holtby has won a cup before. He's the goalie they brought in to replace Jacob Markstrom, and maybe they thought that spark would work. But goalies aren't normally leaders in the locker room unless your name's Carey Price. So maybe he thought he'd be a Roberto Luongo, who they gave a captain to technically, but he just never was. And I don't know if they try to trade Braden Holtby or what they do with him, but Braden Holtby was under 900 save percentage, and he was not good, to say the least. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, Vancouver's got a lot of cap problems, and unlike a lot of teams that have cap problems, they're definitely not contending for the Stanley Cup because Tampa Bay's like 17 million over. I think Islanders were a couple million over. I'm going to see if you know this. How much were the Bruins over the cap, or were they not? Or quote unquote over, but like you're up against the cap. I know the Stars are.
I'd say 5.
Okay. So
let me check. Let me check cap friendly.
Yeah, Tampa is quote unquote 17 million over because Kucherov was out the whole season, so that didn't affect the cap, and then the Stars are in tricky cap space, but the Canucks are trapped in the cap, and the people they are paying aren't doing well for them, and it's just a messy situation. But I think we can move on. Let me know if you get anything else to the West Division. And number 1, we predicted Vegas, but of course Vegas was not number 1 because Colorado was number 1. and they had the best record in the entirety of the NHL, and they did not make the Stanley Cup Finals. But Colorado, Nathan McKinnon, and Rantanen, they just had some great players, but they do have some things coming up because Makar, I think, is this a contract year or he's up? His contract is up. So
He's
what
a
are your
restricted
thoughts on
free
that?
agent.
Okay, restricted.
But also, I
So-
have the Bruins are 1.7 million over the cap, so that's not bad at all. 1.7 is like, that's just like a rookie contract or not a rookie contract. Oh well, it depends on what the rookie is, but small deal. It's not 17 million, which is over two players, considering the fact that no one makes 17 million. So I think that's a lot more egregious than 1.7. How much? Do you know how much the Stars are over or no?
No, I'm not sure, but I know we're close up against it, and then we got to pay Heiskanen. So I'd probably guess 2.
Dallas Stars. Oh, okay. Update. It's taken 20 years to load.
Okay, is cap friendly?
No, I'm using Spot Track. You guys are $341,000. So you guys are over the cap, but only by $341,000. So
Gotcha. Yeah, but just to the point, Dallas, Boston trying to win a cup, Vancouver definitely not trying to win the cup, and their cap's less.
to your point, all the three teams we just mentioned, Boston, Tampa, Dallas, have all made the cup within the last 3 years. Boston 2019, Dallas 2020, Tampa in 2020 and 2021. So all these teams are at least using their extra money to try to make the cup. Unlike the Canucks.
Yeah, but now on to Colorado. What'd you think?
Yeah, this is another cap issue, especially if they want to sign Cale Makar to a team-friendly deal, which they're going to have to keep him. But I think you're allowed to go over the cap for restricted free agents. I don't really know how it works. I know in the NBA you are, but I'm kind of confused on how it works in the NHL, especially after the flat cap that they've instilled. But you look very confused.
I am very confused.
What are you confused about?
I'm not there yet with NHL, but also if someone wants to sign Makar, there's like 3 different levels of picks they have to trade.
It's more than 3. It's like 5.
Okay, but like I know it's like either first round,
And
second round pick.
it depends on how much they offer Makar. And that's only if the team that they offer. So basically what happens is, let me explain it in short term. There's like 5 different things, and it's based on how much money you give. So let's say you offer him $5 million, right? Or it's based on the average. So it's 3 years, $15 million, just for easy money. $5 million. I think you'd have to pay him 2 first-round picks and a third. Is how that works. But that's only if the Avalanche don't match the contract. If they match it, they don't have to pay him anything. And now you're just making them probably pay more for Makar. So sometimes you overpay the player and see, does this team really want him? This Sebastian Aho thing happened. The Rangers, I believe, tried to sign Sebastian Aho and went way over what Sebastian Aho probably should have made. And they're like, they're not going to pay this. And then they paid it. And now Sebastian Aho's playing really well. So, I mean, that's really how it really works for restricted free agents. But
Gotcha.
yeah, Colorado played well, and they won the West on a tiebreaker. Point percentage was the exact same with Vegas, so I'll give us credit there. When it comes down to a tiebreaker, when both teams have the same amount of points, I'm going to give us the benefit of the doubt, considering it was way too early predictions. It wasn't right before the season ended predictions. But yeah, they're a team that definitely needs to make a run soon, especially with all the money that they're paying. Nazem Kadri, I think they should move off of. He's had way too many suspensions to stay consistent playing wise in the NHL, and they haven't made a cup, and that's really concerning considering the fact that they haven't even made a conference finals or conference semifinals yet. They've lost in the second round the past 2 years. One in Game 6 versus Vegas this past year, and then one versus Game 7 in the Stars. So I mean, you really can't.
Yo, Kivaranta, baby. Hell yeah.
They also lost in the second round that other year, 2018. So this is 3 straight years where the Avalanche lost in the second round. The other year they lost to the San Jose Sharks. So when you can't make a conference final or a Stanley Cup semifinal like it is this year, you're not really making much progress. They're kind of stagnant, despite the fact that their players are getting better. They keep losing in the same rounds. So I just don't see improvement, and that's concerning. Even though they have a great team and a great roster, and I definitely expect them to eventually go over the hump and win a cup for the first time since 2001.
Now I think we can move on to Vegas, who turned out to be number 2, but we had number 1. But we get credit because it was a weird technicality for the tiebreaker. Vegas just lost again in the conference finals, but regular season they did well. They are also really against the cap, and it will be interesting to see what they do. But what were your thoughts on them this season?
Man, I really thought Vegas would beat Montreal. I'm like, Montreal has a chance against Toronto. Because of Toronto's history, I'm like, Montreal has a chance against Toronto. And then when they beat Toronto, I'm like, Montreal has a chance against Winnipeg. When Winnipeg lost, and that means Montreal moved on. While Montreal obviously has a chance, every team has a chance. I thought that Vegas would win the series at probably 5 or 6, maybe 6 or 7. I didn't think it was going to be a sweep because Montreal has way too many veterans for it to be a sweep, and I didn't think Montreal was going to sweep Vegas. I just didn't think the series was going to be a sweep. There's way too many players who've been to a cup and done stuff before that you're going to win a series. You're going to win a game in the series. But the last 3 games of the series, even though Vegas won Game 4, Montreal was the better team by far. Montreal was destroying them. Vegas looked bad in Game 5, and that was out their home ice. They got run out of the building 4-1. Run out of the building. The Montreal Canadiens are undefeated this year in the playoffs when they score over 2 goals. It's impossible for them to lose because Carey Price isn't going to give up 4 goals. He's not going to give up 4 goals. I don't even think he's given up. I know he's given up 3, but I don't think Montreal's even lost a game when they've scored 2 goals. You can fact check that. But is Montreal scored 2 goals in a game and lost? You can check that.
No, I don't think so.
I don't think they
I
have.
remember hearing that because Vegas scored 2 goals in Game 6, but Montreal still won that one. So they
Yeah.
So,
And Montreal lost Game 4, but they lost it 2-1. And the other game they lost in the series, they lost 4-1. So if Montreal scores 2 goals, I think they win every game. And that's an issue for Vegas because Vegas last year during the Stars, what was the story? They can't score. And whether it be Hudobin or the great defenders on the Stars, they couldn't score. They just were terrible. They just could not score. They won 1 game, and then the Stars were out of them. It was a genuine sweep. If Vegas would have got swept there, it would have been really bad. But luckily for them, they won a game. Now, in this series, they got outplayed, and I think every game besides the game they lost the game they won Game 1 4-1. And even though Montreal, you could say, was being outplayed in Game 3 when Montreal won that game, I think all the outplay goes out the window when Fleury basically puts it in his own net. I think Montreal outplayed them in the other game because they were just a better team in Game 4 and then lost. But, again, credit to Vegas for winning that game, but something needs to be fixed. When they took out Ryan Reeves, the hitting went away, and they just became a finesse team. And you can't become a finesse team in the playoffs. Finesse teams never win. Never. You have to have some bit of grit in you to win a game. If we look at teams like the Tampa Bay Lightning, they have Pat Maroon. Pat Maroon will check you very, very, very hard. And there's a lot of guys on Tampa who would do that, Victor Hedman, but they also have skill guys. You can't just become an only finesse team. If we look at the Stars last year, all their scoring besides Pavelski was by defense. It was defenders scoring besides Pavelski. We don't talk about Pavelski because Pavelski was having his greatest playoffs of all time. But the Stars last year, they were a great defensively scoring team. If we look at teams that make it very far, your defenders have to be big. It doesn't mean you have to score necessarily, but you have to be big. You have to make your presence felt. And Shea Weber Shea Weber scored his first goal of the playoffs in Game 6 versus Vegas. But throughout the entire playoffs, he's been a big presence. He's been hitting guys. He's been playing tremendously defensively, pushing guys out of Carey Price's lane. If you look at some of those shots that are taken from the point, nothing can be seen. And Vegas isn't fighting hard enough to make their guys present in front of the goalie. They're just not trying hard enough. Montreal wanted it more than Vegas, and I think that's a big issue considering the fact that they made a trade to send Nick Suzuki, Thomas Tatar, and I think another pick for Max Pacioretty. And Nick Suzuki is now in the next round. They decided to keep Cody Glass from that draft and trade away Nick Suzuki, and it failed.
And how many goals did Pacioretty get in the series against the Canadiens?
1.
Yeah. It's true. It's good points. And also Corey Perry for both the Canadiens and the Star. He's a big dude that will hit you, and he does it very well. And like that's, you mentioned Tampa Bay, but the other two people that Tampa Bay is now facing the past two cups were Stars really ruggedy, and then Canadiens ruggedy. And then that really contrasts with what Vegas did their first year. Like they used to hit a lot, but now they've become a lot more finesse, and they haven't made it back to the Stanley Cup Finals since. But I think we can move on to number 3, a surprise. We had Minnesota. We did not have Minnesota. Minnesota actually was number 3, and we had St. Louis, and we didn't have Minnesota. We had them just missing the playoffs. But Minnesota, Kaprizov was great. Talbot was great. They're in an interesting situation now with Kaprizov, but what are your thoughts on Minnesota?
Yeah, they were a great team that honestly almost made Vegas lose in the first round. Jordan Greenway, a guy I mentioned then, great. Eriksson Ek is a great defensive center, almost won a Selke. They also obviously have Dumba and Suter at the back. And wow, their team, I think in the future, if they can sign a deal with Kaprizov, which is looking like they're having a hard time doing, if they can just sign Kaprizov for next season, I think they really could be dangerous and would be a top 2 team in their division next year. It's just, can they take that next step by signing Kaprizov? Their team is definitely going to be a team to watch, as most of their good players are younger. So I'm excited to see what they do in the future.
Yeah, and now I think we can move on to number 4. We have St. Louis. We had them at number 3. They just fell to 4. Tough for them, and they were not able to win a game against Colorado. But what are your thoughts on them this season? Actually, one quick thought. St. Louis, their goaltender that they won with when they beat the Bruins. So when the Bruins lost the Stanley Cup game, so that when they lost in the finals, it was, I'm pulling up his name right now. It was, I believe, I'm pulling up his name. He's just blanking on my head. Binnington. Binnington was incredible when they beat the Bruins, and he's at a very interesting state right now. But what are your thoughts on the Blues, Austin?
Yeah, so the Blues are a team that's really taken step backs ever since they made it to the finals and obviously won versus the Bruins. They're a team that lost in the first round last year versus the Canucks and lost in the first round this past year against Colorado, where they didn't even win a game, and it was a dominant victory by the Avalanche, to say the least. They're a team that added Torrey Krug, who obviously played with Boston before, and they lost Pietrangelo to the Golden Knights, who obviously had a great playoff. So I don't know. There's going to be some soul searching. I know some guys on that team retired that had won a cup with him. So it's going to be an issue for them going forward as their team continues to age. Luckily, they did win that cup, so everything is not less serious, but the fans will at least be gracious for what they have given them recently. And so expecting another cup is not as important as it is for a team like the Bruins, who haven't won in 10 years, or the Stars, who haven't won in 21 or 22 years, or a team like Vegas, who obviously hasn't won ever, Colorado, who hasn't won in 20 years. So all these teams who haven't won in a long time, the pressure's more on them. But St. Louis, they won 2 years ago. Their team's getting older. They're losing some of their good guys. I think the fans are content, but obviously the Blues are trying to win another one before all their guys get too old that they can't compete.
Yeah, it's excellent points. Now we move on to the team that did better than we actually thought. It was Arizona. What were your thoughts on the Coyotes?
Yeah, another team that made it to the playoffs last year. They were impressive during certain parts of the year, but they were never consistent. And I do think that's something they need. They also need more scoring. They added Taylor Hall last year, but he just really couldn't do the trick. They started off amazing last year, added Taylor Hall, everything's coming together, and then Taylor Hall just really didn't perform. Phil Kessel played well, but and so did Ekman Larson, but and so did Chikrin. Jacob Chikrin was also probably their best player all year, besides their goalie, obviously. So I mean, they're a team that I definitely think has future prospects of making the playoffs. However, whether or not you can go on a run is basically up to their goalie, Darcy Kemper. Darcy Kemper played well last year in the playoffs and stole their game from the Avalanche in the first round. So we'll see what happens. But they're a team that definitely exceeded our expectations that we had them going 7th instead of 5th. But they still have some things to do if they're going to want to make the playoffs.
Yeah, and now we go to a team that did not live up to our expectations, and that's the LA Kings, who I believe traded Palmieri to the Islanders. No, it was the guy to the Penguins. Why am I blanking on
Jeff
his
Carter.
name? Yeah, Jeff Carter, who I think he won 2 championships or 3 championships with them. 2.
He won 2 championships with the Kings, but he was also on the Philadelphia Flyers team in 2010 that went to the finals and lost to the Blackhawks. So he had 3 finals appearances, but he's won 2 with the Kings.
So what were your thoughts on the Kings this offseason or this season?
They're definitely a young team that I think is going to be looking good in the future. It's sad seeing Jonathan Quick not playing as good as he used to, as he obviously won a Conn Smythe in 2012 and was a big reason why they won 2 cups. But they played him so many games, so they didn't have a backup that he just is worn down. I do think he can be a backup in the future with Cal Peterson as a starter, and I do think they could take that next step next year as their team continues to get younger. But they still have a older core around Dustin Brown and Anze Kopitar and guys who've been there for a while, along with Drew Doughty. So I do think they can make a run next year potentially, but this year they underperformed as we thought they were going to make the playoffs.
Now we move on to San Jose, who is just 1 spot lower than we actually had them in our predictions. And San Jose, they really haven't committed. They haven't really said they are going to do a rebuild because some of their players, I think Carlson has voiced that he doesn't want to be a part of another rebuild. So they're in a tricky situation. What were your thoughts on the Sharks this season?
Yeah. So the Sharks are a team that need to do a rebuild. However, it may not have to be as big as some people on their team think. Especially as how the divisions are looking next year. I do think the Sharks could make a run. But it depends on how Brent Burns and Erik Karlsson and the rest of their defense come through, and whether or not they actually draft a first round goaltender like they should. While he probably shouldn't play next year, that'll be a good rebuild for the future. Maybe you just do a 1-year rebuild where you try to get rid of the guys who are concerning your team cap wise or aren't performing out their contract, and then not this next season, but the year after that, you start the rookie goaltender. So I mean, I don't think they're that far away from it, but it's big that they realize that they need to do a rebuild soon, or there's no chance of them winning with these older group. I like Patrick Marleau. He obviously set the record for the most games ever played. If he wants to come back, I think they should re-sign him. There's no reason not to have a veteran guy in the locker room. And there's a difference between rebuilding and still having older guys. Like we saw last year, Vince Carter was on the Atlanta Hawks. This year, they're in the conference finals. You can rebuild with a older guy to teach the younger guys how to play. I think Patrick Marleau would fit that beautifully. Not only are they both crazy old, Vince Carter was crazy old, and now Patrick Marleau's crazy old, but they also have been there before. Not while they haven't won a championship, they made it on some runs, and Patrick Marleau was obviously on that team that made the Cup final in 15-16. So I definitely think that it's. Uh, I think it'd be good to keep Patrick Marleau if he wants to stay. He still has some game in him, and he can teach the younger guys how to play. So I wouldn't be against it.
Yeah, that's very true. Um, Maybe San Jose does better. We'll see. Now, another team that we talked about earlier, I'm sure their fans are looking upon that moment, and that's the Anaheim Ducks, who we predicted be last, and they were last, and so we're not really shocked. But what are your thoughts on Anaheim?
Yeah, so they still have their center who won them a championship a long time ago, Ryan Getzlaf. He's getting older, but their team's really young, and I do think that they in the future can make it far. I know Travis Zegras, a guy who is a hero for the USA team, uh, that that won the whatever, what is it called, the something World Cup. It's something like that. It's the is it IIHF? Is that what it's called? International something.
That would that would make sense. You're talking about world.
Oh well, it's like World Juniors, but it's something. It's not. I don't think it's called World Juniors.
World Junior Ice Hockey Championship.
Yeah, it's the IIHF World Hockey Championship, the International Ice Hockey Federation World Championship. That's right. Yeah, and he was a hero for the USA as they beat Canada, and now he's obviously on uh the Ducks, and then there's also Jamie Drysdale, the guy they drafted last year, at number 6, uh, and he's performed really well. Um, So I do think they have a bright future. However, they're probably 2 to 3 years away from even having a chance of contending, uh, especially if the teams ahead of them in their division continue to perform. However, the West is pretty weak, so um, it seems like it's going to be a very top-heavy division, a division that includes. It's going to be. They have Vegas, obviously, but besides that, they obviously are going to add Seattle, who may be a new Vegas. It's going to be interesting to see how that works, but the West will probably be the weakest division. So a lot of teams are going to have a chance of making a cup run, as we saw. The lowest team in the cup in the Stanley Cup playoffs has a chance of making it far. I mean, the Kings were number 13 and were an eight seed in their side, but won a cup in 2012. So it could be something crazy that happens, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, could be something crazy, and we will see in the future next season. Now we move on to the Central. Number one, we predicted Carolina to be number one, and they were number one. We talked about Sebastian Aho. Vincent Trocheck was incredibly good, and their offense, especially their defense, um, played really well and helped them score. But what were your overall thoughts about Carolina this offseason
Yeah,
or this season?
Carolina has made the conference finals back in 2019, but they've really been on a downhill lately, and that's really an issue when you consider the fact that they were supposed to make an extra leap this year. They obviously made it out of the qualifying rounds type of thing, the preliminary round last year against the Rangers that they swept them, but then they obviously lost to Boston in the first round, and then this year they lose in the second round to Tampa after having a grueling series against Nashville. So they got to figure out how to take that next step. Maybe they sign another veteran who's been there. Uh, Jordan Staal obviously had one of the best years of his career, and he obviously won a championship in 2009 with the Penguins. So I'm not surprised necessarily that he performed as well as he did in the playoffs, but they're going to need more guys like that. And the future of this franchise is obviously, I think, with Alex Nedeljkovic. Nedeljkovic performed very, very well in the playoffs and really showed how a rookie goaltender could play. I mean, he gave me Cam Ward vibes, as Cam Ward obviously won a championship with them in 2006. So, yeah, I think they're on the right track, but they got to get over the hump as they haven't made the conference finals in 2 seasons.
Yeah, that's true. Good points. Now I think we can move on to number two. We had Tampa, but Tampa turned out to be number three, and it was a team that we did not have making the playoffs, and that is the Florida Panthers. Spencer Knight is a guy that will be, I think, a lot more use prominently next season as he faced some tough challenges against Tampa Bay. But they were quite a surprise. And what were your thoughts on how they played this well?
Yeah, Florida I really think is going to be a good team going further. Uh, I mean, Carter Verhaeghe, a guy they got off the Lightning who won a championship with them last year, really performed well. They obviously got Patrick Hornqvist, who had won a cup or multiple cups with the Penguins before, and he performed well, obviously, uh, with the Panthers. And then Alex Barkov, a great player. I believe he won the Selke this past year. Um, Another great player. And obviously, Jonathan Huberdeau, who's one of the most underrated players in the league. We can't forget about Dreiger, their goalie, who I will think will be the goalie going forward, along with Spencer Knight, even though they have Bobrovsky on that large deal. So, yeah, I think their future is bright, and obviously they surprised us, so they could surprise us in the future.
Yep, that is true. And now we got Tampa, who was ended up at 3, but that was just because Carolina and Florida were playing really well. And Tampa hit a rough patch, but Tampa played really well. Vasilevsky has been incredible. Um, Kucherov was injured for the whole regular season, and I believe Stamkos was injured for a majority of it. So that could explain why they didn't play as well to our expectations. But they just continued doing what they did last season, and they ramped it up for the playoffs. But what were your thoughts?
Wow, they've just been so impressive. I know part of that's the fact that they're so far over the cap. So, I mean, they have a great roster, and obviously Nikita Kucherov was out for the majority of the season. So, it's not surprising he's performing so well as he's been well rested ever since the Cup final. But they're definitely have one of the best rosters I've ever seen in person while I was alive. So I do think that they have the advantage here in the Cup, but we'll get to our preview tomorrow. And for the Lightning going forward, I think they're going to be dangerous as long as they can keep their core together, especially with Vasilevsky.
That's a key thing. Victor Hedman, incredible defender. And then it will be interesting how they deal with how over they are the cap. Like you're 17 million over. It'll be very interesting. So maybe this could be in, maybe not. We'll see. Now at number 4, sadly, we had Dallas just making it, but actually it's Nashville. Saros played well for the Predators, and Dallas just faced some injuries, and they had a key win against Dallas, where Dallas could have if they had won, would have been closer, but Nashville was able to secure it. So, what were your thoughts on Nashville?
Nashville was surprising. I really did not think that they were going to make the run at the end of the season as they did. We obviously had them missing the playoffs barely. We had with the 5 seed. I just anticipated Dallas, but Dallas had a lot of injuries during the year, and obviously they had 2 COVID spurts. Or well, not one was a COVID spurt, and the other one was a ice issue where the power was out basically across the entirety of the Dallas area, so that didn't help. But wow, I mean, it's going to be crazy going forward as they're kind of in a no man's land. I know they made a good run against Carolina, but they have a lot of older guys in the roster, especially guys like Roman Josi, who's not that old, but he's getting older. And obviously, I don't think Pecorino is coming back next year. And if he does, I'd be fine with it coming back as a backup to Saros. But it's going to be an interesting year next year, especially when you consider the fact that they have a good bit of free agents. So on the flat cap, it's going to be surprising how they go around choosing how to spend the rest of their money.
Yeah, that's very true. Now I think we can move on to the team that just missed in Central. We mentioned them, Dallas, mentioned injuries, Sagan, Bishop, but Ottinger played really well. And then also Jason Robertson. He's played incredible, and definitely a good thing that we can see in the future with Sagan. Radulov also injured, but they were still able to hold on. Now the big thing is Heiskanen And then we also have I was thinking Hintz. Hintz was injured, but he kept playing, and if he was healthy, maybe they make the playoffs. But if they can just get healthy, then I think they can definitely make the playoffs this year. Am I being overly optimistic or realistic?
It depends. Obviously, you guys got to re-sign Miro, and that's a big part of the season. So it really depends on how much money you give him and how much that affects what you do in free agency. But it's all up to the health of the goaltenders. Obviously, that's been an issue as of late, as Hudobin's not been 100% healthy, and obviously Ben Bishop's been out for a significant amount of time. So I definitely think they have the pieces. Obviously, they have guys who've done it before. They know how to do it. And obviously, Tyler Seguin's won a cup in 2011 with the Bruins. He also went in 2013 with the Bruins, and then obviously went last year while he didn't play particularly well, or as he is paid to do. He was dealing with significant injuries, and I don't hold it against him. So they definitely can make a run next year, but it's all up to health and how they're a really old team. So can the guys stay good? Can Pavelski be the best player on the team again? Because if he can be the best player on the team and Sagan and Jamie Benn get back to where they were years prior, um, along with Radulov staying healthy, they could be dangerous again. But it's all up to health and how their older players play.
And then also I think Alexiak is a free agent this year. So that would be a tough loss if we lost him. But hopefully they keep him and they find a way to keep Miro. Now we have Chicago up next. They exceed our expectations by just being up one more in the division rankings, and they were pushing it. But near the end, they just kind of they made a few trades. They traded away Yanmark to the Golden Knights, but Subban I think was a good um, idea. He played well for them, and maybe they can push for the playoffs next year because you still got Patrick Kane, and it looks like they may just use those picks and get some good players and get a lot of rookies next season. What do you think?
Yeah. Chicago's obviously having the scandal as apparently two players were allegedly sexually assaulted, and that's really coming out right now during the 2010 season, and that's going to be interesting to see how that works out. But obviously, they have a lot of good players on their team. Uh, Kirby Doc uh, is a young guy who's trying to get back healthy wise, and then Alex Brinkett played well last year. I don't even have to mention Patty Kane, and then obviously Kubalik's played well. But it's all going to be their goaltending. They're probably draft a goaltender, and Lincoln, who started off a year well, kind of followed at the end, and same thing with Subban. But Jonathan Toews has been out for a while. We won't see if he can come back until this offseason. So they have some of the pieces in order to make another run and make the playoffs that they did last year, but um, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, we will see. Now we move on to Detroit, who's definitely in a longer phase of rebuilding than Chicago, and they do have some promising players, but they still are just going to need to bring in some better players through the draft. What do you think?
Yeah, much longer rebuild for Detroit, but I feel like they're closer than Columbus because Columbus is having issues. We'll just do both of these simultaneously because I feel like these teams are comparable, especially with the records so close. And obviously, the Columbus Blue Jackets fired John Tortorella, and Patrick Laine is getting paid a good bit, isn't performing well. While Detroit, I do feel like is on the right path. It seems like Columbus is going the opposite way. So I wouldn't be surprised if Detroit can be 6th, 7th in their division next year. But I do think they're on the right path. I think 1 to 2 years, Steve Yzerman will have his team in the playoffs. Obviously, Steve Yzerman was the man who really made this Tampa Bay Lightning roster what it is, and he moved over to Detroit to try to do it with the team that he was obviously a Hall of Famer for. So I think Detroit's on the right path. Obviously, they traded away Mantha and got some good things for him. So I wouldn't be surprised if this team 2 years down the line is making a playoff push.
Yeah, and then I agree with you on Columbus. They hopefully Laine picks it up for them, but we'll have to see how he does next season as he bat out a few things. But now we can move on to the East. And number one was Pittsburgh, we predicted Philadelphia. That's probably the biggest miss in this prediction, as Philadelphia was did not make the playoffs, but Pittsburgh played really well, did not play well, did not live up to the expectations by losing to the Islanders. But Crosby played well, but their goaltending seems to still be an issue. What are your thoughts on Pittsburgh?
Yeah, it really makes it clear that they should have kept Fleury. If Fleury was on this team instead of Jari or Matt Murray on these past couple runs, maybe they could have made it farther. But obviously, Matt Murray was the goaltender for the 16 and 17 Cup, the main one. So it's not surprising necessarily that they chose to keep him, and then obviously they decided to keep Jari over Murray. So it's really been an issue lately, their goaltending, as Jari had one of the worst playoffs I've ever seen, at least statistically speaking, as he was -8 goals expected. So, wow. If they can just get their goaltending settled, they're obviously a team who can win a cup, especially with Malkin and Crosby on the same team like they have been for their entire careers. So, I don't think their futures continue completely dark, but they're going to have to get their goaltending settled.
Yeah, maybe they pick up a guy who looks to be on the open market, Hudobin. We'll see. Maybe me being a little too hopeful. But number 2, we have the Capitals. Goaltending was an issue for them. One got injured. I'm forgetting. Why am I forgetting? Samsonov, I think, did not come in. I think he started game 3.
Yeah, because Vanacek started game 1. Vanacek got hurt. Craig
is.
Anderson started game 2, and then Craig Anderson came in at game 1 after Vanacek got hurt, and obviously Samsonov came in for game 3. But yeah, they're an older team. It's going to be surprising whether or not they bring back Chara, what deal they give Ovechkin, what do they do with some of their older players, and they're definitely a team that has to win now. We had them on our cup or bust, and they lost in the first round. So they're an older team that lost their coach Barry Trotz, who's now made to the cup semifinals twice in a row. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, we'll get to Barry Trotz and the Islanders in a second, but now we got number 3, Boston. Boston we had number 2, but they turned out to be number 3. Interesting if they keep. It's a contract year for Hall, correct?
It is, yes.
So maybe they keep Hall, but they definitely need to add another goal scorer outside of Pastrnak, Marchand, and that line. They just need to fill in the bottom line. But what are your thoughts on Boston in this past season?
Yeah, defending is definitely something needed. I think if Tuukka Rask wants to come back, I wouldn't be mad. But Tuukka was hurt for the rest of the entirety of the playoffs, and I wish we had started Swayman in game 6, was it? 6? Yeah, 6. I think that would have given us a better chance of making it through that round, but obviously it wasn't to be. And secondary scoring has been an issue for the Bruins for a while now, and I do think that was the main issue why we couldn't win a cup in 2019. And if we're going to win in the future, we need to probably re-sign Hall or re-sign somebody close to him, or re-sign some people close to his abilities so that we could get more goal scoring. I hope we re-sign David Krejci, a guy who won a cup in 2011, who's played for the Bruins for his entire career and is a good secondary scorer and is an essential part of that line. So if we can just make sure that we get secondary scoring and adding a little bit more on defense, I do think the Bruins are still cup contenders.
Yep, we will see about that. Number 4, we got the Islanders. Islanders just got knocked out in Game 7 against Tampa Bay in the conference finals, but Barry Trotz has done well. They've done really well with some of their trade deadline acquisitions. Kyle Palmieri. I think Pajot was not this year, but the last year, or was it this year?
The last year. He was traded from Ottawa.
Okay, so that's another pick, and then it will be interesting to what they do because I believe Livier is a restricted free agent or unrestricted, but they need to pay him, and he made some great plays, especially in Game 6, getting the game winner. So what are your thoughts on this past season from the Islanders?
Yeah, I mean, they made another impressive run to the Stanley Cup semifinals, but they can't get over the hump. They were one game away. Last year they were I believe, 2 games away, or were they 3? No, 2 games away. Yeah, they lost in 6. So, and then I just fact checked it. He was traded last year by Ottawa, like I said, and then John Gabriel Joe still on the team. But they just need to make sure that they stay consistent, that they keep their really good players, and just running back. I feel like guys are getting injured that hurts their team, but they're still playing through it. Varlamov played very well. So did Sorokin in the games that he played. So I think their future is still bright. And while there are some older players like Andy Green on that team, and Varlamov is 33, I believe, uh, I definitely won't be surprised if they make another run next year to the Cup Finals or Stanley Cup semifinals or however far they do make it.
Yeah, now we can move on as the Islanders just fell a little bit short. This team actually went a little bit higher, and that, of course, is the New York Rangers, who just signed Gerald Gallant. Not breaking news because this has happened a few weeks ago, but the first time I believe we're talking about it. So, because the Rangers came really close. If they're in another division, they would have made it. Um, Maybe if it's not a COVID year, does Montreal make it and changes the whole fabric of time? But TVA didn't allow that. That's a little low-key Easter egg. But the Rangers definitely have a young core, and I think they would definitely be in the playoffs next year. But what were your thoughts on them this past season?
Yeah, so it's a little disappointing as I thought they were making strides last year to make it toward this year they could make the playoffs. Obviously, last year they lost in the preliminary round, and this year they didn't even make the playoffs. Or last year they really didn't. I don't believe any team that lost in the preliminary round last year made the playoffs. But I definitely think next year they can make a push. Alexi Lafreniere definitely did not play as well as many hoped, but he's a young guy. Capo Caco still is growing as a young player, so they have a lot of young pieces I believe will be effective in the future. It just depends on whether or not they can make sure that they still have their star players playing well, like Panarin and Crew play well. It's all up to the star players at this point, and can they play consistent?
Yeah, that's a big thing. And now we move on to Philadelphia, as we had them going as the number one overall seed, but they traded some players. And one thing to me that I think goaltending is an issue. Carter Hart would have some great games, but then he'd have some not so great games. So, what are your thoughts on the past season for the Flyers?
Yeah, so the Flyers are definitely getting older, and they're going to have to do something soon if they want to do it with this group of guys. But I still think Carter Hart's a great goaltender. He didn't perform as well as he probably should have, but it's not something I'm going to hold against him. It was a hard year. Obviously, COVID was happening, and um, it was definitely a very fluid year and a hard division. So I won't be surprised if he brings back next year a great record, and this year will be forgotten as a bad one, but not one that stunted his growth at all. It's definitely going to be concerning whether or not their older guys start to flounder. But it seems like they do well one year and then bad the next year, and then that means next year they do well. So I wouldn't be surprised if next year they rebound and make sure that this year was just a fluke.
Yeah, and we will see if it is fluke next year. Now we move on to the New Jersey Devils, which I actually believe is the team that traded Kyle Palmieri to the Islanders.
And Travis Zajac.
Okay, and Ajax.
Zajac.
Kyle Palmieri. Zajac?
Zajac. Zajac.
Okay. That guy, because I'm terrible at pronunciations. But Kyle Palmieri definitely did play well for the Islanders, and New Jersey looks like they're going to that rebuilding route. But what were your thoughts on them?
Yeah, it's kind of it's kind of crazy. If we look at the past couple of years, the last year and obviously this year they traded Palmieri and Zajac, but last year they traded Andy Green, the guy I mentioned, to the Islanders also. So they're trading a lot of guys to the Islanders. They're very close to each other in real life. Like the Islanders are not that far away from New Jersey, obviously, and they're trading a lot of guys there, which is kind of funny. But They're a team that hasn't obviously been to the finals since 2012 when they lost in 6 to the Los Angeles Kings. They haven't won one since 2003. So, yeah, 2003 when they beat the Mighty Ducks of Anaheim. So, they're kind of stuck in a rebuild. Jack Hughes is starting to perform well. So is Nico Hersher. I'm bad at pronouncing names too, so I don't
You're
really know how
asking
to.
the wrong person on the pronunciation.
Huh?
If you're asking me if that was the right pronunciation, I'm not the right person for that.
Yeah. I don't know how to say it. It's Hischieer. Hisher. I don't really know how to say it. I'm also kind of bad at pronouncing things, but he's performing well also, and their team, while PK Subban's not playing as well as his trade counterpart, Shea Weber, obviously that was before PK got traded again. Or no, did he just sign with the Devils? No, I think he was traded to the Devils. I can't remember, but he signed or was traded to the Devils, and he's not performing like he used to. While Shea Weber is now in the conference, won the conference finals and is now in he won the Stanley Cup semifinals and is now on Australia for his first Cup appearance. So they're a team that's still rebuilding and is probably still a couple of years away, especially with how hard the division they play in is.
Yeah, now we go to the last team that actually got number 1 overall pick in the draft lottery, and that's the Buffalo Sabres. They traded Taylor Hall, and it looks like Jack Eichel is looking to be traded as well. And so it's a tough thing for any Buffalo Sabres fan. So what were your thoughts on them?
Yeah, I don't really know if he's trying to be traded or not. Jack Eichel, it may be rumors, it may not be rumors. I don't really know. But they're also a team that traded Eric Stahl to the Canadiens. Or maybe they released Eric Stahl and he went to the Canadiens. I can't really remember. Something happened where the Canadiens went there. But or he went to the Canadiens. But yeah, the Sabres were absolutely terrible. They went on one of the worst losing streaks I've ever seen in my entire life, and it really did not help their case during the rest of the season to do any better than they did. And obviously, they got rewarded with the top pick in the draft. So it's not shocking that they did that, but we thought that they would be better than terrible.
Yeah, it's tough for the people up north of Boston. If you're an Islanders fan, they've done better. Mets are looking good. Yankees, even though they're losing to the Red Sox right now. But pretty much you got Jets, got Giants, Devils, now Sabres. We do have the Bills, but not looking great. But this concludes our first ever NHL predictions review. Make sure to let us know your thoughts in the comments or at our email, outsidersopinions2020@gmail.com. Make sure to check out our next episode, which will be the NHL semifinals review and Stanley Cup final preview. Thank you for listening to Outsiders Opinions.